Okay then, in today's video I'm going to show you one of the easiest methods to beat the Nightmare Soul Burst DREGGODYNE raid. So with that being said, let's get straight into it. Let's first start off with the teams that both players will need, which don't worry, I made sure to use Loomians that are pretty easily accessible. So starting off with player 1's team, the first Loomian is going to be Plasmoth. The ability it's going to want is going to be Thunder Summon. This will let Plasmoth summon the Thunderstorm Weather for 5 turns whenever Plasmoth first hits the field. And then the item that we're going to want is going to be Heavy Shield. Then for the moves, we're going to want Jumpstart. This is going to give us a +2 range attack bonus to Plasmoth and our ally, although it is going to cost us some energy, and it will normally cost us 25% of our health, although if we use this move in Thunderstorm Weather, it's only going to cost us 1/8 of our health instead. We're going to want Thunderstrike just to deal damage, Rejuvenate to stay around for as long as possible, and then Tase just so we can waste one of the DREGGODYNE's health bar effects to get rid of its status ailments, so it doesn't constantly keep boosting its stats, especially earlier on in the battle. And then for the UPs, TPs, and personalities. For the UPs, we're going to want them to be maxed out across the board, so 40 in every stat, although we actually aren't going to be using our melee attack and melee defense stat, so these stats don't really matter, but everything else, we want to be as high as possible. And when I mean high as possible, I mean the max stats. For the TPs, we're going to want our health stat and our range defense stat to be maxed out at 200 TPs. Then we can put 4 TPs into energy, and then we can put the rest of the 96 TPs into range attack. Then for the personalities, for the positive personality, we're going to be using Very Clever to make us as range tanky as possible. And then for the decreasing personalities, we aren't going to be using our melee attack stat or our melee defense stat, so Frail and Tender are completely fine, it doesn't do anything to harm us. Their second Loomian is going to be a Phasenaut, which yeah, I get it, it is a roamer legendary, although because it's a soft resettable, everybody can get at least one pretty easily, so I'm going to count it as being pretty easily accessible. So, starting off with the ability learn. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. Yes, the secret ability is better, so that means you're going to have an easier time in the raid, although Phasenaut hits really hard without it, so honestly, Malware is completely fine. But if you have got a secret ability one, you might as well use it, but it isn't 100% necessary. Then for the held item, we're going to want Specialty Goggles, just to let us hit harder. Then for the moves, the only move that Phasenaut really needs is Thunderstrike, which is its strongest electric type move, although we are going to need just 3 random moves. We're not going to be clicking these ones ever, but we do need them, because all of the specialty items require the user to have at least 4 moves, it can't have less. Then, for the UPs, TPs, and personalities. For the UPs, we're going to want them to be as high as possible, so 40 in every stat. The only stats that we don't really care about are the melee attack and melee defense stat, so if those aren't perfect, that's completely fine, but every other stat, we want it to be maximum. For the TPs, we're going to want to maximize our range attack and range defense stats, so 200 TPs in both of those is going to be great. Then we can rock 4 energy TPs, and very importantly, we're going to want 96 speed TPs. And the reason why this is so important is because if you're battling specifically the Nightmare difficulty for Soul Burst DREGGODYNE, it's actually going to be level 55, which means its speed stat is going to be 131. So if Phasenaut has 40 speed UPs, and 96 speed TPs, it will just barely outspeed the Soul Burst DREGGODYNE by 1 single stat point. Although, we don't want our Phasenaut to be blazing fast because we also want it to be slower than our Plasmoth. Then for the personality, which because Phasenaut is a roamer / legendary Loomian, it doesn't have access to the totem personalities, so we're going to have to deal with Smart, which is just going to make us hit as hard as possible. Although, to add on to this really quickly, while it's true Smart is the best option for Phasenaut, it isn't 100% necessary, because I know a lot of people probably don't have a Smart Phasenaut, and I also know a lot of people have probably also already caught their one soft resettable Eliphage, and I don't want to have to make you hunt for another one in the wild. So, if your Phasenaut has any of these positive personality traits, it is completely fine just to copy this exact same set, it's still gonna work. But if your Phasenaut has any of these negative personality traits, then honestly I would not recommend using them. Clumsy means we're not going to hit as hard as possible, Foolish means we're going to take more damage, and Sluggish is going to mean that we're not going to outspeed the DREGGODYNE. And yeah, you might have realized I didn't mention anything about a nimble phage knot, which is weird, because the most popular phage knots are most likely going to be nimble, which most people probably have in their PC boxes already, but the reason for that is because we have to change the set a little bit. So, if you're going to be using a nimble phage knot, the only thing that you need to change is the speed TPs. Those 96 speed TPs will move from speed to health instead, which will make us a little bit tankier, but it doesn't really matter in the long run. However, making our phage knot slower is actually what we want, because if our phage knot has 40 speed UPs, 0 speed TPs, and a nimble personality, we'll still have the exact same speed as a smart phage knot that we had on the previous set, 132, which will still outspeed the Soulburst DREGGODYNE. However, it's going to make us slower than our Plasmoth, because the entire idea is our Plasmoth is going to use Jump Stat before our phage knot attacks, so we can make it stronger, so then when phage knot does move, it's going to get the added benefit of hitting even harder. And then player 1's last Loomian is going to be Moriel. For the ability, it doesn't actually matter what ability you have because it only has one of many. It's the only ability it has. For the item, we're going to want Specialty Goggles, just to let us hit as hard as possible. For the moves, we're only really going to need one attack, which is going to be Thunderstrike. This is going to be our strongest electric type attack. And then for the other moves, it doesn't really matter what we have, we just need 3 random moves on Moriel, just so Special Goggles actually works. Then for the UPs, TPs, and personalities, which, starting off with the UPs, we're going to want them all to be 40, just as maxed out as possible. The only stats that we don't really care about are going to be our melee attack and melee defense stats, but also, we don't really care about our speed because there is no way Moriel is ever going to outspeed a Soulburst DREGGODYNE. For the TPs, we're going to want to maximize our range attack stat and range defense stat, so 200 TPs and Buffaloes is going to be great. Then we can rock 4 energy TPs and 96 health TPs. Then for our personalities, we're going to want Very Smart as our positive personality. This is just going to let us hit as hard as possible. And then for the negative personalities, I would recommend running Frail and Sluggish, so even after the Soulburst DREGGODYNE raid is over, you can still use this Moriel in PvP if you want a more offensive Moriel. Although, it is completely fine to run Tender as well. These stats we just don't really care about, so any combination of these personalities is going to be what you want. And then for player 2's team, which, to be honest, most of these Loomians and set details are kind of the exact same, except for one minor change, so I'm just going to speedrun through these, and I'm not going to explain them too much because I've already done that. So, the first Loomian that player 2 is going to want is going to be a phage knot, although, if you have a nimble personality on your phage knot, then use this set instead, but if you have any other personality, then use this one. Their second Loomian is going to be Moriel. Our job again is just to spam Thunderstrike, that's kind of it. And then the last Loomian that player 2 is going to want is going to be a Plasmoth, which for the most part is going to be the exact same as player 1's Plasmoth, just with one minor difference, and that's actually a move. Instead of Tase, we'll want Thunderstorm. And just to quickly explain why we've made this small change, player 1's Plasmoth should already have tased the DREGGODYNE, and once DREGGODYNE clears the status ailment, you can't paralyze it again, so having 2 tasers is kind of pointless, so instead we can run Thunderstorm on player 2's Plasmoth. So if player 1's Plasmoth faints before the Thunderstorm weather ends, our player 2's Plasmoth's ability won't activate, so after a couple of turns when the Thunderstorm weather does end, we can reset it back up with the move instead. And now, let's jump into the raid to show you how to use the team. Player 1 will want to lead off with Plasmoth, while player 2 will want to lead off with Phage Knot. For turn 1 then, the Plasmoth is going to want to go for Jump Start, while the Phage Knot just spams Thunderstrike. Which, this will always delete the first health bar, and the DREGGODYNE should respond by clearing the stat increases that we set up, or by using its Soul move, and then it will use a normal attack. Which for me, the DREGGODYNE ended up using its Soul move followed up by an Egg Storm, which Phage Knot will always live unless we get critical hits. For turn 2, because DREGGODYNE didn't clear our stat increases, Plasmoth will want to use Tase, while the Phage Knot continues to use Thunderstrike again. Although, if the DREGGODYNE did clear your stat increases, Plasmoth will want to use Jump Stats again. Which, this will always delete the second health bar, and the DREGGODYNE should respond by clearing the stat increases that we set up if it hasn't done so already, or by using its Soul move if it hasn't done so already, or by clearing the status ailments. Which for me, the DREGGODYNE ended up curing the status ailment, followed up by an Egg Storm, which knocked out my Phage Knot, which this is what should happen most of the time, but there is a chance that the Phage Knot can stay alive, which is great for us. That just means we can delete even more health bars. For turn 3, because my Phage Knot died, I'll have to go into Moriel and use Thunderstrike, and because our Plasmoth is healthy, and Moriel doesn't have a range attack stat increase yet, I'm going to use Jumpstart. But if Phage Knot is still alive, just keep spamming Thunderstrike, and if your Plasmoth is weak, it shouldn't be by this stage, but if it is, use Rejuvenate to heal, or if you no longer have any stat increases, use Jumpstart. Which this will most of the time delete the third health bar. The only reason why you won't be able to is if Plasmoth needs to heal, and the stat increases were also removed. But if you do remove the health bar, the DREGGODYNE should respond by clearing the stat increases that we set up if it hasn't done so already, or by using its soul move if it hasn't done so already, or by clearing its status ailments. Which for me, the DREGGODYNE used Typhoon, cleared my stat increases, and it also healed. For turn 4, because my Plasmoth is weak, I'll use Rejuvenate while my Moriel uses Thunderstrike. But if your Phage Knot is still alive somehow, just keep spamming Thunderstrike, and if your Plasmoth is healthy, then you can use Jumpstart to give yourself a stat increase. Which, this is where the battle might slow down a little bit, because the DREGGODYNE can finally use its other special effects, where it can heal itself, it can tank a hit, or it can increase its stats. Which, for me, DREGGODYNE used Typhoon, and that was all because I didn't remove another health bar. For turn 5, my Moriel is going to continue to use Thunderstrike, and because my Moriel doesn't have a stat increase yet, my Plasmoth will use Jumpstart. But again, if your Phage Knot is still alive, keep spamming Thunderstrike, and if you already have a stat increase, Plasmoth can either use Thunderstrike to deal damage, or it can use Jumpstart again anyway to give you even more stat increases. Which, this is where you should remove another health bar if you haven't already, which for me, the DREGGODYNE used Egg Storm, set up its offensive stats, set up its defensive stats, and also prepared to tank a hit. For turn 6, because my Plasmoth and Moriel are both so weak, I'm just going to use Thunderstrike with both of them. But if yours are still healthy, Moriel can still use Thunderstrike, while Plasmoth can use Thunderstrike, Rejuvenate, or Jumpstart. And yeah, if Phage Knot is somehow still alive, just keep spamming Thunderstrike. Which for me, the DREGGODYNE ended up wiping out my Plasmoth and Moriel, so now player 1 will want to go into Phage Knot, while player 2 goes into Plasmoth. For turn 7, my Phage Knot will use Thunderstrike, while my Plasmoth will use Jumpstart. And for me, the DREGGODYNE ended up using Typhoon, which means my Phage Knot will live as long as I don't get hit with a critical hit. And for turn 8, because the DREGGODYNE is on such low health, I'm going to use Thunderstrike with both my Plasmoth and Phage Knot to end the battle. But of course, you might end up getting different results throughout the battle, so you'll have to learn how to use the team and how to adapt when different results come through. But for me, this is how it usually goes. So yeah, the entire idea behind the team is to have Plasmoth support the team with Jumpstart to let us hit harder, and it will also force the DREGGODYNE to have to waste one of its special effects, removing them. The first Plasmoth has Taze to also waste one of the DREGGODYNE special effects, while also setting up the Thunderstorm Weather, which will increase our damage even more so, it will make our electric type moves cheaper, and it will also make Jumpstart not remove so much of our health when we use it. This is also why the second Plasmoth has Thunderstorm instead of Taze. We can't Taze the DREGGODYNE for a second time, so we might as well bring it back up to reset the Thunderstorm Weather if needed. And then, because Plasmoth is super tanky, we might as well let it stay around for as long as possible with Rejuvenate, while Thunderstrike still gives us the option to deal damage when it can. And yeah, Phage Knot and Moriel are pretty obviously just here to deal damage. Phage Knot is one of the strongest electric-type Loomians in the game, and Moriel has a great range attack stat, while also being tanky and resisting both of DREGGODYNE's stab moves. And of course, this isn't the only team that you can use to beat the Nightmare Soulburst DREGGODYNE, so make sure to leave a comment listing out your teams if you have any other options. This will let people have more options instead of just using what I recommend, and if people already have all of the Loomians that are on your list, it can get them to start raiding even faster.